Oh, baby. No skin on skin? You just got to keep the shirt on.
Listen to me. Only the best for my daughter. This is 100% Loro Piana Vicuña.
She's going to puke on it any minute.
There is not
You're using Loro Piana to wipe her when she vomits.
No, this is the sweater that she's got her face on, but this is the softest material, natural material on Earth.
Really?
This is not subject to any supply chain constraints.
Oh.
In fact, when you buy one from Loro Piana, they'll fly one right to you. Guys, isn't it amazing how people in power cannot take any time off and still remain in power and engaged when you have a baby?
JCal, what's the reference?
Okay, our friend Joe Lonsdale, venture capitalist living in Austin, had a tweet that went viral, but maybe not for the best reasons. He said in response to a Dan Primrak tweet, Dan works at Axios, who was talking about Joe Rogan criticizing the amount of time Buttigieg was taking on paternity leave. And Joe Lonsdale responded, "Wow, great for fathers to spend time with their kids and support moms, but any man in an important position who takes 6 months of leave for a newborn is a loser. In the old days, men had babies and worked harder to provide for their future. That's the correct masculine response." Well, it was an opinion from 1957. That's either his or he found it in the Wayback Machine. But Joe's old school. Joe is a unique individual. And he just happened to, I think, in this whole not get canceled debate or don't let yourself get canceled debate, the right is now saying I'm just going to tell you how I actually feel. And so Joe told us actually how he felt.
I don't think he said anything offensive. I think you can have a different opinion than what he said. But I don't think he said it shouldn't exist. He said if you're in a position of power and you check out for 6 months, it puts everything that you're doing under a lot of pressure. That's, I think, what he said. And he called those very specific people losers. The context is Joe Rogan called out Pete Buttigieg because Pete Buttigieg had 2 kids via surrogate. And I guess is taking 6 months, or I don't know. I don't even know how much time he's taking.
He's at
off.
3 months, but nobody knows if he's working half time or full time.
But Rogan had an issue with it. And then Dan Primack basically said, what Rogan doesn't know is at his own company, i.e. Spotify, there's a 6-month policy.
Which, by the way, Joe Rogan does not work for Spotify. They license his show. So there is no way for Joe Rogan to know the internal policies. He is not an employee.
I mean, Jason, if you want to hang your hat on that little fig leaf, okay.
No, I'm just saying I'm not defending Joe, but I'm also saying how would he know? It's not like he went to HR and was like, "Hey, what's our paternity?" He doesn't work there. Yeah,
fine.
Well, 6 months is a long time, especially. I mean, that is a long time to take off.
The word loser is a very strong word. Do you think men who take paternity are losers?
No. I mean, it's their choice.
Do you think men who take 6 months of paternity are
I wouldn't necessarily call him a loser. I do think that is a long time for somebody who, prioritizes work. I mean,
if an entrepreneur took 6 months of paternity, would that influence whether or not you invest in his business?
Well, look, if you are the principal of a business and you just disappear for 6 months, that's not going to work. I mean, let's be realistic here.
Unless it does, in which case then you have other problems.
Well, or look, if you're at the stage that Google is at or whatever, the founders can disappear and move to, islands and private islands, and it doesn't matter.
Basically what they did.
But look, we all know, I mean, that when you're a startup, you face existential decisions daily, weekly, or monthly. You can't just disappear for 6 months. It's not going to work.
You might only have 6 months of runway. So if you did take 6 months of paternity, there would be no company when you came back in all likelihood.
Let me speak for myself. I couldn't ever take 6 months. I'll probably take 3 weeks to a month. And honestly, I agree with David. I really didn't do much of anything. Nat had to do, frankly, all of this by herself. And so I'm there to just be moral support and help where I can. Baby needs a diaper change. I do that. I'll hand feed in a bottle because she's tired of pumping and, breastfeeding. But I am so peripherally at the edges trying to help and be relevant and try to give her a break here or there. That's my role. And at some point when the kid gets on a schedule, there's even less stuff necessarily for me to do other than, again, just be moral and emotional support. Then, of course, there's bonding and stuff. But, to be honest with you, I have found as a parent, the connection that I have with my children has gotten meaningfully better as they've gotten older. And maybe that's just a limitation that I have in my need to communicate and how I want to connect with my kids and how I feel I get feedback back that gives me energy to be a parent. It is much easier for me to find that equation with my 12-year-old than it is with my, 2-day-old. So that's just me. I'm going to be out for 3 weeks to a month. And
Well, I mean, the other thing we're leaving out here is the question of resources. So Joe Lonsdale, according to his podcast, is a billionaire, his podcast title. And so if you're a billionaire and you have unlimited resources at home and 24-hour night nurses, which, we all know what those cost. You're talking about $1,000 or $2,000 a day to have 24-hour coverage, but that's nothing to a billionaire. So if you, I don't want to make it about class, but if you were two working parents and you didn't have the money to hire somebody, this is actually practically the only thing you can do. Somebody has to be with the kid. And can one spouse be at home for 24 hours alone with the kid all the time?
As you guys know, I'm from Canada. In Canada, we have a 1-year maternity and paternity leave policy. It can kind of go both ways. The basically the family gets it and you can allocate it as and how you need it. And
who pays for the salary?
The government basically guarantees your job. You go on effectively unemployment insurance after some period of time where you go from 100% of your salary to about, I think it's 50%. Somebody will correct me if I get these details wrong. And then you go through the rest of the year. Now, in both cases, my sister, when she had both kids, on the way in, she was like, I think I want to take the full year. And by the 6-month mark, she was losing her mind. And, she's a lawyer at a really good research hospital. And, she does work that's really valuable to her and that she finds really stimulating. And she just needed more adult connection after 6 months. It was very hard for her to kind of be there.
Yeah. I just think 6 months for the second parent that seems like a long time.
I don't think I could take 6 months off. But I also think if you have resources, there's pockets of time. Even when I did stay home for, I don't know, the first couple of weeks after the kids were born, they're asleep for 3 hours and then you clean the diapers, feed them, they play for an hour or two, and then they go back on a nap. It's like it's constantly the stop and start. I mean, that's the thing that's hardest about it is the lack of sleep, I think.
Oh my God. It feels like, it's funny, but like I forgot what it's like, but you're reminded quickly. It feels like you're drunk.
Yes.
2 hours, you wake up. You get a 10-minute cat nap, you wake up. And this is where, again, I go to, and I'm such a bit player in this play right now, at the edges where like Nat's sleeping, I can take care of Tali, but I don't know how women do it. It's incredible.
And for those of you listening, Chamath has got his newborn on his chest and swallowed quite nicely there.
This is why you should subscribe on YouTube. And you can see. You can see that.
Yes, he's using his new daughter to get the YouTube subscriptions up. This is good. They should blow us past 100,000 subscribers. But how do you feel?
It's so special. I feel so lucky. I feel so lucky.
This is going to be the most popular cameo on the pod since Freeberg's dog.
Yeah, I mean, this chick is so deliciously cute. She's so delicious. And I forgot how beautiful the sounds that girls makes versus boys, having 3 boys and 2 girls now. I remember the boys, they make kind of interesting noises, but not really. But my gosh, like little baby girl noises. And you guys, Sax has 2 girls. You have 3. Freeberg, all girls. Girls are incredible.
We're all basically girl dads like Kobe.
Oh, so what a blessing. What a blessing. I feel really lucky.
Any news on your front?
Well, we had a baby the day after Chamath had a baby. So we're...
Oh, right. I did see the pictures. Yeah. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Freeberg, where's your swaddled infant? You're letting Chamath win sweeps weeks here. What's going on?
His vicunia's on the way. I haven't been.
Are you in the Joe Lonsdale? You did one day off and then went right back to work?
She's in the place where you drop the kids off to get raised and then you pick them up in a year.
Okay. You're like, you mean like Vulcans? You're like Vulcans where you drop them into a learning pod and come back a year later?
I mean, they sleep most of the day. So she's asleep right now. Actually, Allison just sent me a picture. She's sitting on the rocking chair where they're outside right now. Pretty amazing.
I give Lonsdale a lot of courage for saying what he thought. I really don't think that what he said was altogether that like vilifiable, if that's the word you want to use. I think that there's a lot of reasonable points of view. He could have maybe used better language, But I think where he was coming from, I think a lot of us probably wouldn't do it ourselves. We may never judge anybody else. I would never judge anybody who wants to take 6 months. I know that I could not. I would just, I think either I'm too selfish or whatever. But I'm not sure there's just that much to do as the secondary. And to David's point, if I was asked to be the primary, I think I could probably step in and do 10% of what Nat would do.
Here's Joe Lonsdale's super blind spot. He made this very gender specific with men and women in certain roles. And he basically is saying, a man who takes 6 months off is a loser. So he is not just giving his opinion, he's attacking people who do take the time off. And then he says, listen, in the old days, men had babies and worked harder to provide for the future. That's the correct masculine response. So I think what triggered people about his response, and perhaps rightfully so, is that this is just a view.
I know, but Jason, here, can I say something?
This is degrading men who take time to take care of their kids.
But look, we've talked about this a lot. There's an opportunity for folks like us to take a step back and slow down in how we interpret a tweet that's written at 8 a.m. in the morning super quickly.
Sure. Yeah, I'm not advocating he be canceled.
And not just him, but everybody else. But like, there's an opportunity to teach empathy here where I'm not saying you have to agree with him, but you can also choose to see what he's trying to say through the exact words that he used, decide that you agree or disagree, and then just move on.
Yeah, of course.
You know what I mean? And I think that the reason why folks may want to do that in this case, but in most other cases, is eventually it will be you that makes a mistake.
Sure.
And you want to be let off the hook by other people that are empathetic enough to say, I really disagree with what you're saying, but you don't deserve to be punished beyond disagreement.
I love what Chamath just said. The mistake that we make might even be on this pod today. I might have already made it. I've already made it. I agree that we should all just be a little bit less judgmental. And there is an element. There is a judgmental element in Joe's tweet that's probably the part I don't agree with. Is look, if someone wants to do that, fine, take the time. Doesn't necessarily make them a loser, but it's not a choice that I would realistically make.
Yeah, it's totally unrealistic.
It's not even startups. Like I'm getting put to these multi-$100 million decisions a day. I can't. I could pause the business, but that'll have so many downstream implications. Unfortunately, I picked a job where I'm in a position where I can't check out even if I wanted to. So I try to do my best.
That's the point he was trying to make that wasn't that well articulated.
Right.
I don't think any of us are in a situation where we can straight up walk away from work for any meaningful time. I mean, on a daily basis.
It would destroy my business.
Yeah, we get texts, we get emails, we get phone calls that we have to answer. And so it's not, almost definitionally isn't an option to just walk away. But for those who it is, and if that's their choice, that's what it is. The great thing about freedom isn't that you can say whatever you want. It's that you don't have to listen to what anyone else is saying. And, for
really
people
well
that disagree with Joe, I feel like you always have the option to not listen and you always have the option to walk away.
Unfollow.
And and unfollow. And the whole idea of cancel culture and, punishing people for the things they say, regardless of what they say, and the censorship and all the shutdown of voices and channels for people to have a voice. I think it takes the freedom away that's inherent in the idea of, your choice to not listen.
Yeah, and it's almost always totally hypocritical. So just as a postscript on the whole Chappelle debate, it turns out that the leader of the anti-Chappelle protests who've been trying to get him canceled at Netflix, it turns out this person has like a treasure trove of the most angry, hateful, vile tweets that or anybody has ever seen.
When you put it in the group chat, I thought that was a joke. The things that she wrote were so beyond the pale.
Beyond.
Oh my God.
They're like the worst.
We can't play them on the show.
No, we can't. I don't even want anybody to speak these things.
I don't want to include it in the show notes.
They're literally the worst tweets
I've ever
seen.
Seriously,
the most
I completely
racist. I've never seen such explicit racism in the 21st century, basically, aside from these tweets. And this is a person who's trying to cancel Chappelle, was out there with the megaphone, and who the press was fawning over.
By the way, and she said in her thing, yeah, those were from a long time ago. I've already owned up to those, so let's move on.
Wait.
Owned up how?
And it's kind of like, let me play the empathy card on me, but then, meaning I expect you to see through what I'm going through. And those expressions were in a moment in time. So see past them and see my true character. That's what she's asking.
Empathy.
That's what she's asking the world to do, about her. But then you're not willing to do it for anybody else. And that's where I think that double standard just doesn't work anymore. And I think this is what people are getting really fed up with.
And I would also say that her tweets weren't funny. They weren't attempting to be funny.
They are so gross.
They were like, I have a customer service problem with this beeping beep.
No, they're so bad.
I want to bash this, beeping Asian or whatever over the head, blah, 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 blah. Like a lot of racism towards Asia, Asian people.
No, there was homophobic tweets. Yeah. There was Asian hate tweets. I mean, Latina, Hispanic. I mean, it was
She
crazy.
wasn't even trying to be funny. That's the thing. It wasn't even a failed attempt at humor. So here you have Chappelle, who I think is dishing it out in an equal opportunity way, making, funny observations about, really, he's criticizing our culture, not specific groups. And he's being deliberately misinterpreted by the people who want to cancel him. They're really, to think that Chappelle's stand-up routine is hateful really requires, I think, deliberate obtuseness. You have to deliberately misinterpret what he's saying. And so you have these people out there trying to do that. And meanwhile, they are guilty of it's a total act of projection, because they are guilty of everything they accuse Chappelle of.
Well, not all of them. This person in particular.
The leader. And of course, the press doesn't dig any of this up. It all happens through kind of internet sleuths.
That would be a narrative violation, David. If somebody is virtue signaling and they are leading a cancellation movement, it's kind of a narrative violation to say, well, maybe they should be canceled by the same standard, or, quite easily. I think the thing that
I don't think she should get canceled. There you go.
Yeah. I don't think she should be canceled, but
what if she said it when she was drunk? What if she had a nervous breakdown?
I can only imagine the difficult path that this lady has gone through. And on the off chance that she's listening, I'm totally cool with your journey. I understand you made some mistakes. I'm going to let you off the hook. Can you please try to let the next person off the hook?
I think that would be a nice place for everybody to aim to go. And then, and just to circle back with Joe, when he started explaining himself in the thread, when it became a conversation with a wider group of people, the journalists went on the pure dunk cancellation route. But then there was actually a productive discussion between CEOs, et cetera. And I thought what was very interesting about it was he started talking to Gary Tan, who, was like, listen, we have a 4-month leave practice at our venture firm. And Joe said, do you really take 100% off cold turkey, or did you work part-time and stay in touch like a responsible leader of your firm? And of course, Gary did just that, right? And then Joe says, you know what? I shouldn't have written loser and appreciate the pushback. In more intensive operational context, losing key leaders cold turkey for 6 months seems unnecessary, but I respect the different takes here. And I think that really is an actual good discussion about this is, hey, well, maybe if you're an intense leader and you don't have the ability to take a couple of months off, well, maybe you should take a couple of Fridays off. And then there was a really interesting discussion. What's better for a leader to do? Spend a little more time every year, or to spend 3 or 4 or 6 months in the beginning when you're, as you just said, Chamath, on the periphery here and trying to be helpful on the margins. Maybe for the secondary person, if it isn't 50-50 sacks, it is actually better for you to pick up some Fridays or whatever and take over the whole.
Well, I'm glad you read that clarification by Joe, because I think what he basically is saying is that, the initial language he used, he basically clarified that. And it sounds like what he's saying is, listen, if you're on a high performance team and you're the star player and you disappear for 6 months, that's going to cause your team to lose. So I think that's maybe what he was saying.
That's a perfect analogy, Sachs, because if we were looking at LeBron James or Kevin Durant and they had a baby midseason, or Draymond had a baby midseason, which I'm sure has happened to, folks, it's not like they say, I'm not playing the next 6 months of games. They miss one game, maybe 2. They go back on the road. And I think everybody understands, like, you can't give up one of your 10 primary years or 3 years left that LeBron and KD have left.
I'll give you one final anecdote to end this chapter of our discussion today. 2007 at Facebook, at one point in like one of the umpteen reorgs we were doing as we were trying to get out of the primordial ooze, I was in charge of HR. And everybody at that company was young, except for a handful of people. And then there was finally a person, and I think it was this HR person that through some weird convolution of events, reported to me who was pregnant. And we didn't have a policy because nobody had ever gotten pregnant before. And, I remember saying, oh, we have to come up with a policy. And what I did was I was like, well, what would I want? Which is the easiest way for me to answer most questions.
Yeah.
And I came up with 4 months for either the father or the mother, irrespective of the context. And that's how we started the original policy. 4 years later, though, when I had my first kid, I took like 3 weeks and I came back because the grind was too hard.
Yeah.